Welcome to another edition of the DLF Dynasty podcast. I'm Dan Myler. With me, Matt Price, who's back. You know, got a little tan there, Pricer. He's back from Hawaii. Welcome back, buddy.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, it was great to get out and recharge. Didn't necessarily want to come back, but certainly missed talking with you guys last week. So
yeah, we missed you too, bud, for sure. Ryan, how you doing?
The love.
I'm doing well. Glad to be back. Glad Matt's back. I missed him.
Yeah, this is Matt. One of Matt's mind melds. He came up with the rookie cash stash and trash series that we do now every offseason, it feels like. And I don't know if it's back by popular demand, but it's back, Matt.
I was going to say, you guys hate this series, and the only reason why I did it because I just wanted to hear Ryan call people trash. Remember, that's the whole point of this series. So if you're looking for a real hard-hitting football analysis, I'm not sure this is the show.
Yeah, we are going to get to some serious trash, though, on this episode. We're kicking off
with the AFC East. That's all you need to know.
We're kicking off the series with the AFC and the NFC East. We're going to go team by team throughout all the skill position rookies. And, you know, we'll hit every team as we go along. We'll do both East divisions out of each conference. And then next week, we'll probably jump down to the South. So, fellas, let's jump right into it. We're going to start with the AFC East, and might as well start with those Buffalo Bills, because they drafted so many skill position players. They did hit. We should say one shining moment is probably that they really addressed the offensive line, 3 offensive linemen, trying to protect that quarterback, maybe create a little bit of rushing room for the 7 times that they do run in a game. The only skill position player, guys, that they picked, however, they waited till round 6, Marquez Stevenson, wide receiver out of Houston. Ryan, are we going to kick it off with a little trash?
I think we have to. The hit rate on these day 3 players in general, but especially 6th and 7th rounders, is obviously pretty low. I like Stevenson coming out of school, but really not surprised he fell to the 6th round. And that depth chart is pretty. It's pretty deep. It's pretty imposing for a rookie like Stevenson. I believe he's a little bit older for an incoming rookie as well, so that's another kind of strike against him. Yeah, we're starting with that trash for Marquez Stevenson.
Matt, you concur?
Yeah, I mean, I could see a scenario where Cole Beasley moves on, next season, and he takes over as the slot, maybe. But like Ryan said, the draft capital is not promising. But he's kind of a speedy guy that can play out of the slot, I think, when contested catches over the middle. So, maybe there's something there. If Gabriel and Diggs are going to be on the outside, maybe he can fill that middle slot role, but probably not. I'll say borderline trash, but I think he could be a stash if you're in a super deep league.
So maybe we took this for granted, Dan, because we have done this for a few years, but defining cash, trash, and trash, future trash. I mean, obviously, cash. We expect that player, even as a rookie, to pay off immediately. Is that kind of what you guys are going with?
Yep. A guy we really expect to be part of our starting lineups in year 1, or a potential starter in year 1, even if he's a flex guy, or potentially even, I would say, a bye week fill-in, injury fill-in type guy, a guy that we think is going to put up numbers very early in his career.
And also, as I was looking over the players, I was kind of thinking about expectations according to cost. So if I think the player is undervalued, maybe that's a cash option.
Sure. Yeah, there's certainly room for that. I don't know if necessarily we're gonna heckle each other too bad for towing the line on these kind of guys. Stevenson, he was a fun guy to watch in the weeks leading and months leading up to the draft, because he does have that speed. He got hammered with injuries throughout his college career, though. Yeah. So we'll see how that affected his draft stock. Maybe he slipped a little bit because of that. If he were to stay healthy, there is some potential down the road, but most likely we're talking about a deep league stash, a guy on rosters with 25 roster spots or more. How about the Miami Dolphins? Because there's a little bit of cash on this roster for sure, and it started right at the top at the 106 in the NFL draft, Matt. Wide receiver Jaylen Waddle out of Alabama. He is all kinds of cash as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he mixes in with the established players there. Obviously Devontae Parker is kind of a replacement level player, I think, on the outside right now, but they brought in Will Fuller, who could, play a similar role to Waddle, but obviously Waddle is far more versatile, I think, than Fuller at this point in his career. So year one might be a little bit up and down, but I think we could still call him cash because I think he's definitely going to have startable weeks.
Yeah, I actually listed him as a stash player, mostly just wanted to make Dan mad on that one. But,
okay.
No, not. I mean, this Dolphins offense is clearly one that's continuing to grow and undergoing a lot of change. Not only do they add Waddle, but as Matt said, adding Will Fuller as well. Preston Williams basically missed the entire season last year. Hoping that he can come back and contribute. So, I really see Tua spreading the ball around with this offense, and obviously that's going to hurt all of the players a little bit. I don't know that we can count on Waddle as that weekly starter, especially in this first year in his career. But of course, the upside I love.
Yeah, and he's going to have those splash weeks, most likely, even as a rookie. It's going to be difficult probably to identify which weeks he's going to be useful unless there's a slew of injuries and that gets him on the field even more. It seems like he's going to have a little bit of a floor just because they're going to try to get him those quick underneath routes and get the ball in his hands and an opportunity to make plays. You mentioned some of that depth chart with Parker and Williams and Fuller, who as we all know is suspended and going to miss a little bit of time. But there's a bunch of recognizable names still on that roster, even beyond them. The guys like Alan Hearns is on that team, and Jakeem Grant is still there. So they're gonna, if he's one of those rookies that they say, let's just bring him along slowly, and he doesn't get that opportunity week one with Will Fuller on the shelf, then maybe it comes along slow. I still think he's cash because he's going to show his upside at the very least in spurts as a rookie. So I'm excited to see what he can do in that rising offense down there in Miami. The Dolphins weren't done drafting rookie skill players. In the third round, they went with Hunter Long out of Boston College, Matt. He's a little bit of an underrated pass catcher, guy that can play in line and be that security blanket, I guess, in the middle of the field. They already have Gesicki on the roster, and he's certainly not going to get on the field right away. But Hunter Long seems like he has just enough upside to be a stash.
Yeah, and I think I don't know this. I think we do have to call him a stash, but I think he's going to hurt Gesicki more than he's really going to have value himself. Sure. He was, like you said, he was a primary pass catcher at Boston College in 2020. He had 22% of their receiving yards, and I think 24% of their total of their receiving yards. So and he can do everything. He can block, he can catch. Some people have comped him to Kyle Rudolph, so he's kind of a boring option there. But you have to think he's going to take something he's going to catch something, right? They didn't bring him in just to be a blocker, probably. So even if it's not in year one, you would think that it probably has some kind of negative effect on Gesicki's, at least his upside, So as that back end tight end one, maybe it takes a little bit of shine off of him. But as a player himself, probably not. We're not someone we're going to be interested in for fantasy purposes.
Ryan, is he a guy that in your tight end premium leagues, even in the fourth round, that you're considering in drafts for the long haul?
Oh, sure. I think he's really, of the players we'll look at today, one of the ideal stash candidates. And it's starting to feel like Mike Gesicki is one of those players that dynasty managers like a lot more, maybe than the Dolphins do. He is going into his the final year of his rookie contract. Haven't heard much talk about any type of extension with him, so I don't know that they'll necessarily let him walk. But again, thinking down the road, that could certainly provide a big opportunity for Hunter Long if he can show really much of anything as a rookie.
And if you watched Hunter Long while at Boston College, he looked faster and kind of even looked bigger than what he checked in at at his pro day. A guy that spread the field just a little bit and was able to make those like lunging and outside the frame of his body type catches. And multiple times while watching him, I came away thinking, wow, I think he's pretty good. He's probably better than what most of us in the Dynasty community consider. Then he went in the middle of the third round. That's the type of draft capital where you can start to see these guys make an impact, maybe not in year one or even in year two, but down the road. So if you're looking for that developmental guy, Hunter Long certainly belongs on the list and is a guy that you could probably throw on your roster with your one of your last couple of roster spots, let him develop there, and then just see what happens with Gesicki and with that offense. Because, it's kind of rough to say, guys, but the Miami offense is something that we all probably want a little part of, at least on our rosters, because it is, the arrow is pointing up.
Yep.
So they made one more pick in the skill positions. It was running back Gerrid Doaks out of Cincinnati, a guy that, I'll be honest, guys, I wasn't all that familiar with, but went back and watched after the selection, and turns out he was a productive guy at Cincinnati. Because he landed in Miami, he's at least a name worth monitoring, right, Ryan?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a lot of people, of course, were expecting the Dolphins to use one of those earlier picks to potentially replace Myles Gaskin. We know that didn't happen, obviously. So Gaskin feels safe, but he still doesn't feel like the long-term option or the long-term answer there in Miami. So whether he makes it through this year and then they look elsewhere, or even if it's Gerrid Doaks or Savon Ahmed, who played pretty well last year as a rookie, turning that into a committee or maybe even taking that job this year. I think just because of the depth chart, Doaks has to be a stash.
Feels that way for me as well, Matt.
Yeah, I agree too. I agree with Ryan. I just, like you said, just because of the depth chart, he's got more size, I think, than anybody else on that roster, 230 pounds. He's a big, strong back. He's got a decent top end speed, but it kind of takes a while to get there. So one of those kind of backs, I'm sure you can picture in your head. So, but like Brian said, with that depth chart, he could certainly grab a primary role if something were to happen to Gaskin.
So we were all in St. Louis for the draft, and the day following, we all kind of went our separate ways and headed for home. And while I was waiting in Chicago at the airport, I was going through the late round picks and the guys that I didn't know, and I watched Gerrid Doaks. I spent some time just eyeballing his game, and he got hit in the backfield more than any running back I've ever seen. So I think that offensive line in Cincinnati is really, really bad. So I think there's a chance he's better than what people expect. He's a guy that in those KS in the kitchen sink leagues, we do those auctions and he's going for a few bucks. Just a guy that I've bid on a couple times, but haven't gotten because I don't have any money. Let's move on to the New England Patriots, guys, because they made another splash. Much like the Dolphins in the first round, they went with a big name in round one, another Alabama guy, Mac Jones, the quarterback out of the Crimson Tide. Ryan, what are we thinking on Jones? This is a really interesting situation because they have the former MVP in Cam Newton, and it seems like they probably will lean that way early in his career. So we've seen quarterbacks make a splash early when they get the opportunity in recent years. Mac Jones doesn't necessarily profile as a guy that's going to do that. And I don't know, considering the weapons that are there in New England, if I really feel good about him being a cash play. Seems like the safe move and probably the smart move is to make Mac Jones a stash player.
And that is what I did. I listed him as a stash, and it's more because of that the lack of offensive talent, especially at the wide receiver position, than it is about Cam Newton. I've said and continue to think I won't be surprised if Cam Newton's not on that week one roster. If they turn it over to Mac Jones or maybe even make a move for another veteran. So I do think we're going to see plenty of Mac Jones, maybe even early in the season. But between the offensive game plan, they've made it pretty clear they want to run the ball this year and build their offense that way. And just his type of game. He's not going to give us much on the ground, which is what a lot of those instant impact quarterbacks offer. because of those things, I've got him as a stash.
It really feels, Matt, like it's what Ryan said there, the lack of weapons there. We're talking about guys like Nelson Aguilar and Jacoby Myers as the top two pass catchers. I guess maybe James White would be that guy outside of the tight ends. So it's a little bit of a tough situation to really handicap when it comes to how a rookie quarterback could mesh and work into this offense. What are your thoughts, not only of what he is, either a cash, stash, or trash, but about this offense in general? Is it a good place, a good landing spot for Mac Jones?
They need to do some work for him, right? He's got all the tight ends of the world. Who knows? Maybe Julio ends up there. I don't know. But
don't do that to us.
Please no. I just think it's going to be an interesting situation because he's either going to go into the year as a starter or he's probably not going to play much unless there's an injury, because those offenses are going to be like, you can't have the same offense with Cam Newton and Mac Jones, right? So despite the weapons, but obviously the weapons are not good either. So it just seems like a situation we want to watch and see. And if you scoop them up in the back end of the first round in your super flex drafts, that's probably what you're expecting anyway, right? You probably weren't expecting to get too much out of them in year one. So absolutely a stash, and looking forward to see how that situation plays out.
The next dip into the skill positions for the Patriots came in middle round 4, with running back Rhamondre Stevenson out of Oklahoma. Matt, there's been a little bit of buzz about Stevenson and this landing spot, and it seems to happen every single year with these New England running backs. Anybody they draft gets that buzz and gets the fantasy community excited. I've heard so many redraft podcasts and shows mention Rhamondre Stevenson as a guy you should be looking at in your rookie drafts or startup drafts or even redraft leagues this fall. I'm just not digging it, really. It's not happening for me. What are you thinking about Stevenson? Is he a cash player, stash, or future trash?
I think he's a stash as well. I think he could be cash. If things break right. Sony Michel, I don't believe they picked up his fifth year option, right? So they probably don't have too much faith in him. We'll use him when he's healthy in 2021. But after that, he's going to be unrestricted free agent. Damian Harris has been fine, but not super impressive, at least the way they've been using him. So if we looked ahead to 2022, then you could potentially see a scenario where Stevenson, is a bigger back. He can catch the ball pretty well for a guy of his size, like 230 pounds again. So you could see a situation where next season he is a maybe not the lead back in that committee, but at least a very important part. And this season, if Michelle is hurt again, then it's almost like they're going to have to play him unless White is going to play a lot more than we think he is only on receiving downs, right? So there's a situation where he could cash this season, but I think we're more looking ahead to 2022 for Stevenson to have any real impact for us.
So 6 players down, and Matt has said stash on everybody pretty much, right?
Right in the middle, right down
right in the middle. Riding that fence.
That's right.
Ryan, how about you? What are your thoughts on Stevenson?
Yeah, I guess I have to follow suit that he's a stash for me as well. I don't think he's a cash, again, because of the depth chart. We look at Damian Harris and Sony Michel and James White there. I just don't know that Stevenson he's certainly not a better pass catcher than James White, and probably not Sony Michel either. I don't think he's a more talented rusher than Damian Harris. So I find it hard to find a way to get him on the field. On the bright side, the Patriots have been a top 5 rushing team in the NFL in 2 of the past 3 years, including last season. Obviously, their first without Tom Brady. And again, the moves they have made this year, including drafting Stevenson, tell us they want to run the ball. So I think he'll get an opportunity. Like you said, with I think it was Jaylen Waddle, it's going to be tough to predict when that opportunity comes, which has always been a problem with the Patriots backfield.
So the good thing is that there's not a ace running back in New England, but it just never feels like there is. So I think we all get sucked into it, even though we're all aware of what Bill and that offensive coaching staff likes to do over there in New England, mix up these running backs, and they all kind of find a role. And from time to time, you see them commit to a guy for spurts. So are we really going to buy Rhamondre Stevenson, who has an ADP in the middle of the third round in rookie drafts, as a potential cash player? It just, I don't buy it. I'm with you guys. It's got to be stash at best for me, really. Matt, you mentioned that maybe he could be a cash player. I guess that is the case, but I think at the most he'd be a cash for 3 or 4 weeks, and then us as dynasty players, we're probably selling him.
He's the one that's going to win all the championships this year. We see that every year with running back 3 and 4s on rosters with guys like Savon Ahmed, right? Like they come in and contribute towards the end of the season. So maybe he's the bullet you need there in week, I guess it's 17 this season.
Yeah. Well, if that's cash, then all these guys could be cash, right? If a 1 week stretch late in the season that could win people titles is cash, then I guess that does it. The last pick for the Patriots was wide receiver Tre Nixon out of UCF. We mentioned the lack of depth, Ryan, on New England's receiver core. Is there any upside for Tre Nixon, or are we going right to trash here?
Again, that 7th round leads me to think this is not a player I'm even going to bother drafting, even if we're talking the 4th round of rookie drafts. But with that depth chart, you got to pay at least a little bit of attention. But ultimately, I went with trash on Tre Nixon.
Matt, Donald Driver came out of round 7. Could it be? What, second coming?
Yeah, I'm going to go trash as well.
There we go. Finally,
he did have it was a broken collarbone or something all of his senior season. So, you never know, especially like Ryan said with that depth chart, another situation to monitor, but probably not. Yeah,
most likely has an upside of being that. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, and also, with New England's track record of drafting wide receivers, on top of all of that, not such a good.
Yeah, they don't have the track record. That's for sure. I've fallen prey to that multiple times, as so many dynasty managers have.
How much more valuable is N'Keal Harry than Tre Nixon?
Like a 3rd round pick, better.
Who was the last offensive player that the Patriots drafted that really paid off?
Oh man, I think Gronk.
It's Gronk,
player?
Right? Yeah, skill. Yeah,
Hernandez,
the 4. That was the same year as Gronk.
That was the same year, and Gronk was after. Or Hernandez was after, actually.
I guess.
I don't know. Maybe one of them. You could maybe say one of those running backs, because they had stretches of a year or two, but they've swung and missed so many times. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm buying any of this stuff.
I guess Edelman, right? I guess it's Edelman.
Oh, sure.
But still, he was that 6th or 7th rounder.
Maybe
Tre Nixon is the answer.
At least we don't have to pretend like that it's going to work out and draft, a player in the top 2 like we did with Michelle and Harry, right? So
yeah, that's where it's really painful. Speaking of pain, the Jets fans have had their fair share for sure. They're trying to turn things around, though. They invested a lot in that offense, fellas, and it started at the top with Zach Wilson out of BYU with a 2nd pick in the NFL draft. Ryan, are you willing to stretch out the cash play here for Zach Wilson? You've been both on board and kind of off board when it comes to Wilson this offseason. There's certainly things to like, but also some things that throw up red flags. What are your thoughts on Wilson?
Yeah, that's very true. That it's in some ways it's easy to make a case both ways for Zach Wilson. And looking at his ADP, quarterback 20 overall right now, I'm calling him my first cash play here. I love the value of him for him both in startup drafts and in rookie drafts. We know he's going to start right away. And as you said, this Jets team with a new coaching staff, new leadership, is making a clear and obvious effort to improve the offense, not only the skill positions, but the offensive line. Cash for Zach Wilson.
I love it. I'm right in line with you on this one because of the value that he has presented. And like I said, there's reasons to be concerned about Zach Wilson and that ultimate upside, but they picked him at number 2 for a reason. And I'm willing to give this new coaching staff, this new front office, a pass on all past transactions that the Jets front office has made. They've made a lot of mistakes, but it seems like they're heading in the right direction here, and Zach Wilson's going to be a part of that. Having him on the field right away, fellas, that can be seen as a negative by some, but I want to see him in this offense. We're going to see that Kyle Shanahan offense there in New York with that mesh concept and the ball out of the hands quickly. That's quarterback friendly. That gives you we've seen guys like Jimmy Garoppolo really succeed in this offense. Zach Wilson can be that until he understands exactly how this quarterback position works in the NFL. And especially considering the weapons that they now have with the Jets. I know it's not a Pro Bowl lineup or anything like that, but the upgrade to Corey Davis, having Jamison Crowder, who, he may not be there once the season starts, but that probably means that Elijah Moore had a great offseason and is going to mix in immediately and play that slot, which is a great sign. So I think there is a lot of things to be excited about with the Jets. And as dynasty managers, we have to be excited about Zach Wilson, even if we didn't fall in love with him in the pre-draft process. Matt, how do you feel? Are you going to come along with us on the cash train?
Yeah, I'll say cash as well, mostly because we're going to get starts out of them in year 1, and there's a significant amount of evidence that shows that even if rookie quarterbacks are terrible, that their value still increases in superflex formats. So no matter what, I think you're going to end up with a cash situation with him, whether it's through production or through an increased value from year 1 to year 2.
Yeah, the ceiling is certainly there with Wilson. He could be a guy that really takes off and goes under the radar just a little bit in dynasty leagues. It feels like he's underappreciated at this point compared to the other quarterbacks in this class. After helping out that offensive line later in the first round, the Jets went back to the skill positions. Wide receiver Elijah Moore early in round 2. Out of Ole Miss, Matt, another weapon for Zach Wilson, a guy that likely will get on the field right now. As I said before, Jamison Crowder is there and will likely take snaps in the slot. If he is moved either by trade or simply released, Elijah Moore could get on the field. So it's a tough call with Moore right now. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, he's going to be a product of that offense works out in year 1, right? And he could certainly be a big part of their success. He's Jamison Crowder with more athletic ability and obviously more youth. So he's shown good production against top competition, good breakout age, all that kind of stuff that you want to see, and lands in a place where you think he's going to get opportunity right away. So I'm going to call him a cash player.
Nice, Ryan.
He's a cash for me as well. Again, it's about that depth chart. And while there's a lot of names there, of course, Crowder's still there, Denzel Mims, they signed Corey Davis and Keelan Cole. I think it comes down to Elijah Moore's the most talented receiver in that group.
Yeah, so we all expect him to get on the field early because I made him a cash play as well. I really, really think he's a guy that may take a few weeks, not a few years, to really come around and become part of our starting lineups, at least as a flex play there in New York. The Jets weren't done. Early in day 3, they took Michael Carter. Now, the running back depth chart, much like the wide receiver depth chart, Ryan, is littered with names, but not exactly a stud, a guy that's going to get on the field a lot early with Tevin Coleman and LaMichael Pirine, Ty Johnson, those guys that have hung around on dynasty rosters for a little while now. Carter seems like there could be a chance for an opportunity for him, but he's a little bit undersized.
He is. And I don't think he's the type of back that's going to become the starter and run away with that job. But I do think he can be an important part of that committee. And I went 3 for 3 on the Jets cash. Michael Carter cash for me as well.
Okay. Right. Matt, how do you feel?
Yeah, I agree. I think even if he, isn't the lead back necessarily, how long is Tevin Coleman really going to stay healthy? We haven't seen that in quite a while. So there's potential that he could he's basically the same size, I believe, as LaMichael Pirine. So in terms of like size, like a size question, if he's going to be the lead back in the committee, I don't think that's really there once Coleman is out of the picture, right? So, and he had 3 seasons of over 20 receptions in college. So I think he could easily be a cash player, and he maybe not necessarily a reliable every week starter, but when we get down into the bye week gauntlet and we start needing players to fill in for all the running backs that are certainly going to get hurt again this season, he's somebody I think we're going to be having in our starting lineups maybe more often than we think at this point. So absolutely cash.
Yeah, even though he's 5'8", just over 200 pounds, he didn't come in at that 185 that we see some of these pass-catching running backs come in at, which really gives you pause before saying he can handle double-digit touch workload. It feels like he could handle 12 to 15 touches if he had to, and could even develop into that kind of player. A lot of people say he's the complimentary guy or the third down or pass catching back. I think he can be a little bit more than that. And because of that depth chart, I'm with you guys. He's going to be a cash player for me as well, because that opportunity will come for sure in year one. And there's a good chance that he's the best running back on that roster. That wraps it up for the AFC East. Let's jump over to the NFC, guys. Division that lacked a lot of talent, so needed a surge of it, really. Let's start at the top with the Washington football team, Ryan. They waited till round 3 to grab a skill position player. It was Dyami Brown out of UNC. The wideout now mixes into a depth chart full of talent after this offseason. How do you see things shaking out for Dyami in Washington, D.C.?
I think he's a player that lost a little bit of dynasty value based on the NFL draft. There was some thought that he might go even higher than he did. But then landing in Washington, thinking about the moves that they made in free agency, specifically Curtis Samuel, also bringing in Adam Humphries. So that just feels like an all-around negative for Brown in the short term. I still like the player. I like the talent. So I went with a stash ranking for him.
I'm gonna say cash for Dyami Brown as well. I just think everything is there for him. He's got the quarterback that's going to throw it deep. He's the deep ball receiver, 2 consecutive seasons over 1,000 yards and over 20 yards per reception. Can stack up defenders right off of the line of scrimmage like not many other players in this class, to be honest with you. So I can see a scenario. They did bring in some other veterans. I am very excited about Curtis Samuel there as well. But I do think Brown can cash for us in year 1.
A little bit of a surprise to me. I went with stash as well because of the other weapons there. I also considered the quarterback position, and Fitzpatrick, I think everybody in the Dynasty community feels relatively well about for this year. But beyond that, there are question marks as to how long he's going to play. And then if they have a quarterback that could potentially take over, that could stunt the development of Dyami Brown or maybe hold him back just a little bit. So I went with stash as well. I think there's some upside for sure, but it's going to take just a minute to see it through. Go ahead.
Sorry, Dan. Matt made the point about Brown being the deep threat, which he certainly showed in college. That yards per catch was crazy, basically throughout his entire college career. I just wonder how this offense is going to try to use Curtis Samuel, because when he was with this same coaching staff in Carolina, they tried to turn him into a deep threat. And that's really why he wasn't successful early in his career. Last year was when he had that breakout year and he was used completely different, more underneath. So I hope they use Brown as that deep guy and let Samuel kind of roam the shorter field.
Yeah, and if he does get that opportunity, as you said, that pushes him closer to being that cash player, because he could make the big splash in year 1 with Fitzpatrick spreading the field and trying to push the ball downfield. So I think there's certainly upside and the potential for it. It's just it probably doesn't feel likely to me.
Yeah.
Let's move on to round 7 when they took wide receiver Dax Milne out of BYU. Anything here, guys? Is there a chance for Dax to make his mark early in his career? Are we thinking stash, or is this a guy that's going to be lucky to make a team, Matt?
Yeah, I think he's probably trash. He probably, really got as little publicity as he did because of Zach Wilson's season, So, yeah, I'm not super confident in him. Not a lot of deep speed. I'm not really sure where he fits in on that, especially if they are going to use Curtis Samuel in those short areas like he was used last year in Carolina, right? So I'm just not really sure where he fits with this offense right now. Maybe he surprises in camp and he's a name to watch, but right now, not somebody I'm looking at.
Yeah, so I sent Dax Milne a DM earlier before the draft, and he answered me. So I'm not going to call him trash, but I'm also not going to draft him. So,
what did you DM him, Ryan? I got to know.
I can't tell you.
Oh man, gracious.
No, he was one of the players that was difficult to find his birth date, and I DM'd him and asked him, and he answered me.
I figured maybe you asked him how to pronounce his last name because I wasn't sure coming into the show. I had to look it up.
I should have done that too.
Yeah, I did. It according to BYU's website, it is Milne. So let's move on to the New York Giants. They went wide receiver early as well. Kadarius Toney. You guys, as a duo, fellas, you've thrown there's been his fair share of shade thrown on Kadarius Toney.
It's not just us.
I know for sure. I'm the lone supporter on the podcast, though. I certainly think there's a lot of upside when it comes to Kadarius Toney, but I got to know what you think, Matt.
I've been coming around stronger. Again, I've mentioned his name before, but Paul Perticchese over Saturday to Sunday, he has a lot of the good things to say about him, and I definitely respect his opinion when it comes to looking at prospects. It's really hard to get back from an analytical standpoint to look at. No breakout until his senior season, and then 2019. This is the most insane stats to me, and I know he was hurt throughout his career, and he didn't play wide receiver for his entire career, all that kind of stuff. But in 2019, LaMichael P. he only had 8% of the target share, which was behind LaMichael P. Ryan, Van Jefferson, and Freddie Swain. So I just don't know exactly what was holding him back in college, right? Other than those injuries, I guess.
Yeah, it was injuries for sure. Ryan, what are your thoughts here? Cash, stash, or trash?
Ultimately, I'm going stash. I do think there's a lot of competition for targets for an incoming rookie. Of course, Slayton, Shepard, they signed Galladay. I did not even know this until now, or did not remember this. They also signed John Ross. I'm not too worried about that one, but was surprised to see his name there. And then obviously Evan Ingram and Saquon are going to get their targets as well. So I think that's what pushes him into that stash category. But I mean, going back to what Matt said, we saw a breakout for a lot of those players in their final season or this past season, I should say. And I really think it's because of Kyle Trask. That quarterback play, Felipe Franks and the other guys they were trotting out before were just horrible. So I don't want to hold that against Toney too much.
I'm actually going to go with stash as well, partly because of the reasons that you guys mentioned there. I really like Toney and his upside. The injuries are certainly a concern, so that could crop its ugly head once again. The other thing for me that really worries me, I guess, is the coaching staff in New York and Jason Garrett calling plays. He is not a creative guy. Him and Kadarius Toney just don't mesh to me. That's not an offensive coaching staff where you think, let's get a playmaker into that offense that they can get the ball to in creative ways in space. Really, they don't do that. Even with Saquon Barkley, at times you think, come on, when are you going to get this guy in space to do something with the football rather than just hand it up the middle to Saquon? So hopefully he changes his ways a little bit. I don't know if he will. It may take a little bit of time to get used to Toney and his skill set. Hopefully not, because he can be electrifying with the ball in his hands. The Giants, speaking of Saquon Barkley, added a running back, a backup, Gary Brightwell in round 6 out of Arizona. Matt, how do you feel about Brightwell? Is he a guy that can mix in, or are we likely looking at him on waiver wires a year from now?
He's probably a waiver wire guy. He's interesting because he was a former slot receiver, so he's going to have receiving shots. But as long as as long as Saquon is healthy and there's four or five other guys on the roster right at that position, then it's hard to see any kind of playing time for him unless he truly separates himself, somewhere early in the process. And with all of those receivers that kind of do the same thing as he might do in the short area, like Toney, for example, then it's really tough to see any path for him, unfortunately.
Ryan, looking at that depth chart behind Saquon, they added Corey Clement and Devontae Booker, who that coaching staff apparently likes, and Raquel Armstrong as well. So Brightwell has a long ways to go to get on the field. Are you leaning towards trash?
Yeah, I think we have to with all of these factors being the 6th round pick, but I'm not too worried about the depth chart. I mean, Corey Clement and Armstead, I like Booker. I think he's kind of overlooked by the fantasy community. If I've got Saquon, I'm certainly trying to get Devontae Booker on my roster, but honestly, probably not bothering with Gary Brightwell, who I've never heard of until now.
Yeah, I'm gonna pass as well. He's gonna be trash for me as well. The Dallas Cowboys they dipped their toe, I guess, into the skill positions round 5 after taking a whole lot of defense. They went with Simi Fehoko out of Stanford, the wide receiver, tall guy, can run a little bit, Matt. That Dallas depth chart when it comes to wide receivers is pretty stacked. Can Simi Fehoko make a run at some playing time down the road?
He can be a stash player for sure. He can play a big slot role for them. This is the last season that they're going to presumably have Michael Gallup on the roster, and then it'll be, maybe even Amari moves on too. So you could be looking at Lamb, Cooper, and then he's competing with guys like Noah Brown and Cedric Wilson. So you can see a way for him to be a contributor in the offense at the very least in 2022. But 2021 looks a little bit rough for Fehoko.
How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I've got him as a stash, and agree with what Matt said as far as one of these guys, either Gallup or Amari, maybe both of them are likely gone a year from now. So I do think eventually there will be some opportunity, and I also like the fact that they don't just run these 3 wide receiver sets and it's the 3 stars and nobody else. We saw Cedric Wilson have a 2 or 3 game stretch where he made an impact. We saw Noah Brown get on the field quite a bit. And you look at the players they've drafted or they've added to the roster this offseason. Fehoko was the only one they drafted, but they signed TJ Vasher and Brendan Eagles and Osiris Mitchell. If you're a Devy guy, all of those names. They're looking for something at wide receiver, maybe planning, as we're talking about, planning for that year or 2 out when their depth chart looks very different than it does now.
I really like what Matt said there, that big slot, that guy with a little bit of speed, that's a little bit different than what they have on their roster. Yeah. So there's an opportunity there down the road. It's certainly a stash and maybe even a long-term stash because of the other names. Your point is well taken as well, Ryan, that these guys do mix in. There are opportunities in Dallas at wide receiver. You can get on the field if you make an impact in practice. So hopefully Fehoko can do that. And, we're the 3 of us are in a lot of these leagues that are rookie auctions rather than rookie drafts. So while Fehoko isn't going in the 3rd round in most drafts, he's a 4th rounder, guy on the free agent market that you can grab in these auctions. He's even going for $2 or $3, just a grab at the end of the auction type of guy. And that's the kind of guy that I can slide into the last spot on my roster. The last team we're going to cover today, guys, is the Philadelphia Eagles. They traded up to get DeVonta Smith in the 1st round at the 110. Out of Alabama, DeVonta Smith. Are we going to get one more cash player in here, Matt?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have to think that he's going to probably be the target leader in 2021, right, for the Eagles offense. So it's that whole offense is going to rely on how Jalen Hurts progresses from year 1 to year 2. We like what we saw in limited action last season. I'm honestly though, I'm not. I don't think I have any shares yet of Smith. I have a couple rookie drafts left. I'm not sure that I will, but I want to use the hype surrounding Smith right now to go out and add Jalen Reagor for a 2nd round pick, because that's something I've seen happen multiple times. But in terms of Smith, just because of target volume in year 1, as long as he's on the field, as long as he's healthy, as long as he breaks all of those stigmas about his size, then he's going to be a cash player for sure.
Yeah, outside of Reagor, you're looking at Travis Fulgham, who made an impact last year, but I don't think anybody's
was a fun 4 weeks.
It was a fun run and things like that. But he's not going to be a long-term big playmaker. JJ Arcega-Whiteside, he's kind of faded in years past. And Greg Ward, I mean, the depth chart, Ryan, is not deep with names. There are opportunities here with the Eagles, and especially with Hurts, who likes to move around, of course, behind the line of scrimmage and create opportunities for his receivers down the field. The sky is the limit for Smith as early as probably week 1.
Totally agree. Has to be a cash player. Looking at their wide receiver, their leading target wide receivers last year, it was Greg Ward, still on that roster. But I mean, we kind of know the story with him. He's just taking advantage of an opportunity. 2019, Alshon Jeffrey, he is gone. 2018, Golden Tate, he is gone. And Zach Ertz is soon to be gone as well, if we believe these reports. And I definitely do. So, absolutely cash, but I also agree with Matt. I think we're forgetting about and giving up on Jalen Reagor way too soon.
Especially with the news that Reagor is going to get a lot of play in the slot, which I think is going to be better for him anyway. So, yeah. Although
certainly I think his strength.
I think Smith is probably, if we wanted to really break it down by wide receiver types, he's probably going to be more successful from the slot in the NFL as well. So it honestly, it feels a little bit like not necessarily the Giants this year because they've got Kenny Galladay there, right? But just like this collection of maybe NFL wide receiver 2 types that, we're going to have to see which one is able to take the lead, I guess.
Yeah, and maybe the one that coaching staff starts to move around a lot and finds opportunities to get the ball, because they do blend a little bit, overlap each other just a little bit. But I really see Reagor as that traditional slot, the guy with the quickness to get open on underneath routes, and Smith more as that gadget type slot receiver. So I think there's room for both of them in the same offense. Certainly, though, it feels like they need that outside threat, a big guy on the outside to spread the defense out and keep them off that line of scrimmage. The last player we should talk about here is Kenneth Gainwell out of Memphis. He went in the 5th round to the Eagles, so kind of muddies the water, Ryan, when it comes to that depth chart. Certainly a lot of Miles Sanders fans on this show. It doesn't totally hurt Sanders and his upside even in the short term. There's reason to be concerned with Gainwell being that pass catcher.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we're still talking about a 5th round running back, and kind of like I said with Dallas, this team and this coach staff is trying to figure out this backfield as well. Not only did they draft Gainwell, but they bring back Jordan Howard. They sign Kerryon Johnson, and Boston Scott is still there. So they're trying to fill out that depth chart with some names too. Ultimately, Gainwell just has to be a stash, and I think he could overtake Boston Scott as that 3rd down back type. But if there's concern for Miles Sanders, I would want to take advantage of that.
It feels like the Kerryon Johnson and Jordan Howard signings are really insurance policies for a Sanders injury. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, and we had a huge thing on Twitter, like once Kerryon was signed, everybody was talking about how much this hurts Miles Sanders, and I just don't get it at all. It seems like both he and Howard are the clear backups that are going to be competing for touches behind Sanders, and then they drafted Gainwell to kind of play the Boston Scott role if Boston Scott can't do it, right? Which, it did hurt Sanders from a reception standpoint down the stretch, but I still think Sanders is far and away the best back on that roster, and I think he's going to be fine for fantasy, and we shouldn't be concerned about any of these other guys on the roster as long as Sanders is healthy.
Yeah, we're going to see DeVonta Smith get some of those touches too, those backfield motion, fake jet sweep, screen pass type throws in the flat. So they're going to have to be creative in Philadelphia with the playmakers that they have on their roster. They desperately need that big outside threat that can make plays in the red zone, it feels like to me. So that gets us through, guys, the AFC and NFC East. Next week, we get to splash around in the AFC and NFC South to talk about a lot of big name rookies as well there, trying to identify some of the rookie cash, stash, and future trash players out of this year's NFL draft. That's going to do it for this episode of the DLF Dynasty podcast. We appreciate you tuning in, and we'll catch you again next week.